Welcome back to another video on Gearsaw Studios, and today we're going to be building a Lucky Block Skywars map. And you can see, very simplistic design, but there's actually a lot more than you'd expect that goes into this, especially since you have to worry about the balance, and then what if you get bad luck? What about the spacing? And, of course, people who actually get pickaxes, what's in it for them? So without further ado, let's investigate how we'd go about this. Starting off, what we need to do is find an area. I'm building on super flat because I'm thinking of potentially submitting this to a server. But anyways, here we have a very generic center. Of course, let's begin with the center island to figure out how we're going to do everything else. And you can see here, very generic circle, 2 blocks thick, ignore the other details. And of course, make sure you have a single center block. And the circle is kind of generic. We can definitely spice it up. But for now, let's just focus on what we want the theme to be. Of course, this is going to be designed according to CubeCraft's Lucky Blocks, so we're going to have an ultra block in the middle, so we need to think about what should our centerpiece of the map be. Of course, it doesn't have to be perfectly 4-way symmetrical, but you shouldn't have a major advantage by being on one side of the map or another. Anyways, we can see very simple stuff in the middle, and we want to fill in the area to make a nice playing field. Don't make it too mountainous. You want it to be generally fightable. Or if the area is too mountainous, make sure there's some nearby areas to have a more standard fight. Alright, you can see, very basic idea here. We're going to go for a more Nether Fortress theme. Of course, no given palette because I want you to invent your own. Think about what you want for a map, and don't base it around a block, base it around an idea like big city or something like that, because that usually just yields better ideas. Trust me, I'm trying to become an author. It's better that way. But anyways, you can see in the middle here, we have a very generic idea, the circle, and then these little islands here. I'm probably going to make more of these and have them circle the middle, each one with slightly different designs, things like that. And now, we need to have our centerpiece. I decided that a tower would be a good idea. However, I also want a lava hazard in the middle. And of course, that's going to be definitely something to balance around. But of course, you need to make sure it's traversable. So here's my idea. Right here, I'm going to have to tower up here, and then I'm going to have stairs on either side, like this. That way, there's no railing. You can still get up and down, traverse very easily, but there's also lava, which means if you have some knockback on a tool or just good at PvP, you can knock people in to get some extra damage. So let's think of it like that. Think about environmental hazards. It's not just about who can click faster and things like that. Alright, now we have these little stairs, we have some basic lava. Notice that it is only 1 block deep. We want to make sure that this map you can't camp all over. So like the bottoms of islands shouldn't be that large, or if they are large, they shouldn't be out of something like obsidian, something easy to break through. As in, if someone really wants to and has a good pickaxe, they shouldn't be able to hide forever. That's the idea. Anyways, we have this lava here, it's a hazard, we have stairs up, and we're going to put a tower in the middle. But we also want to make sure that it's kind of iconic, while also, we don't want it to also be camp worthy. It shouldn't be crazy tall, have constant access that you can cut off, things like that. If there's only one staircase in it, it might cause issues, so we're going to not make it terribly tall. Think of it like that. You also want to make sure that anyone, even with the worst of intentions, can't exploit the map too much. But now we're going to make a tower, and here's some general building advice. We want to make sure that nether brick is not the only block. Even if it might not generate in the nether, say we're doing, of course, nether theming, you can use anything. I mean, this is just building 101. So maybe incorporate some banners, concretes, things like that. We want to make sure that it is still interesting to look at. Of course, you can't be using netherite blocks. We need to make sure it's balanced, but we can have a bit of fun like that. Incorporate some random things. You could even use resin in here. Of course, keep into account what version you're playing on. If you're doing 1.8, of course, use only 1.8 blocks. If you're on a modern version, use modern blocks, etc. Right here, you can see the middle is getting closer to completion, or at least gameplay-wise. Of course, we still need to do a bottom at some point, but now we should discuss the actual lucky blocks. Of course, This might change based off of the variant you're trying to do. I'm doing a CubeCraft version. Anyways, to denotate what I'm going to be using, yellow shulker box for a normal one, light blue for a more powerful one, and green for the ultra one, which allows you to fly, insta-kill sword, whatnot. Yeah, the mode is pretty interesting. But anyways, you can see on the corners, we have some netherwort growing, and we need to add a little bit of decorations and some more boxes. If they're all at the middle, then this isn't really too useful. So let's make sure that there are some in other areas. And of course, make sure that some of them are normal blocks, even if they might be a bit boring. Still, we have to include them. And now, of course, we need some other decorations. So if you're doing another theme, you could potentially add some fences with skulls. Make sure they're not wither skulls, because soul sand wither, that wouldn't be fun. But anyways, you can see here, we could have a collection of these on some areas. Make sure they're far enough away that they aren't touching. Things like that. That way, it's just a bit more interesting. Who knows? You could probably do some cool stuff if you're able to add some more decorations. And remember, make sure to keep it nice and playable. Also, these lava things, I made sure to make it a bit more interesting. Some spikes here, just to make sure that your map is fun and cool to look at. And this tower here is complete. You can pause to take a look if you want another tower. And notice the piece here is hollow, so that way it's harder to camp up here. Right here, the middle is still being decorated. Need to add a few things. But you can see on the corners, I've added some smaller islands with these little spires. We're going to worry about the undersides towards the end. And now, we need to figure out what's the shape of the map. Of course, there's a lot of different ways, but you can have like 3 islands on each side at roughly the same points. You could have a bridge, and then they'll be surrounded at the ends. There's things like that. You need to figure out what's the shape. And you can look at existing maps in order to see what you want to do. And most games support anywhere from 12 to 16 players, so keep that in mind. But anyways, you can see here, it's a pretty generic middle, but it has everything we need. And then on the corners, we have a little bit more fighting area and some more lucky blocks. Notice I put some mineral blocks, because if you're playing in one where mining is enabled, then you can see, well, you can make some armor off this. Keep that in mind. Make sure that there is still some stuff to grab. And now it's raining. Right here, we have the middle. It's effectively complete. Of course, gameplay-wise, something's kind of missing, but you can see these corner islands have been moved up a few blocks. Of course, still having the iron for anyone smart enough to get a pickaxe. A little bit of a glowstone halo here. Potentially, we'd want to have respawn anchors around the map. I don't know, that doesn't sound terribly fun game design when you get one hit by one. But it would be fun to blow people up with it. But anyways, you can see here, very generic. And then we have right here a little bit of an island that connects the player bases to the rest of the map. And this should be roughly cross-shaped or circular, something like that. Whether you want it to be close enough that you could just jump, or you want it to involve a little bit of bridging is up to you. But you can see in the middle, of course very incomplete, we have a tree being built out of some crimson and smooth basalt. This is because we want to have wood to be accessible. That way, anyone who does get resources can actually craft a sword. Anyone who does not get melee weapons somehow can at least get themselves a wooden sword or axe. And we should always incorporate that into the design. Include little piles of stone, wood, things like that, so that way people, even if they have bad luck, are always able to potentially win by getting some basic necessities. Regardless, of course we have that island there, we have the mid, and now we want to copy this 4 times, of course once it's complete. And then we'll start worrying about what do we do here. Some maps have multiple layers to the middle. They'll have rings and such, maybe we could have a wall here that you have to get past, something like that. Regardless, we want to have something kind of interesting around here, so that way it's not just a floating disc with a tower on it. Right here, you can see those little islands connecting the player bases are complete. The tree is very simplistic. It's a pile of logs with a blob of smooth basalt. There's some hidden TNT inside of it. Some crafting tables, you can include some lucky blocks in here. And then, of course, we need the middle to be slightly larger. I noticed mine was too small, so I kind of completely redesigned it. You can see here how we have these platforms. By the way, this part's unfinished, don't worry about that. These platforms have blackstone and crying obsidian along with coal and blast furnaces. Notice the campfires under the lava as well. Keep that in mind. But anyways, you can see, well, we could potentially get all the way up to stone tools, maybe even some gold off of these gilded blackstone piles. And then additionally, if you're smart enough to use some of the stuff up here, the glowstone, then you could make a respawn anchor as a super weapon. And then right here, an iron block, and combined with this little piece of stone, you could potentially get full iron armor if you maintain control of the center long enough, which is a really good benefit. Not to mention, there's a hidden diamond block in the very center behind these shulker boxes, which makes sure that you can be very strong if you do the proper preparations, rather than chasing down any player with your own sword. And now, there's not too much else to say. You can see they're very simplistic things. Down here, it's all nether brick, there's nothing hidden inside. We could hide some lava, who knows. Don't make it super campable, but you could definitely make a full underside to this. And then, well, we'll start designing the player islands, but that comes in a moment. And also, you might be interested in putting more islands around, just containing random resources, more blocks, etc. Maybe little 3x3 platforms around the center, things like that. Really helps make the map feel more cohesive. With some extra modifications to the middle, of course we have these side islands. Now, it's time to start assembling the player islands. By the way, I just attached a sphere to the bottom of this. Yeah, not super interesting. But anyways, what we want to do is make sure that this hypothetical starter island involves a little bit of wood, so that way you can get going even if you get very bad luck. Then, you should probably have some cobblestone, same reason as in the middle, maybe even some hidden ores, things like that. That way, any player still has a chance to win even if they got terrible luck and every single one of these gave literally nothing. So think of it like that. We need to make sure that it's still playable even if you don't use any of the lucky blocks. And then it should be decently sized. Of course, some maps are larger than others, where these kinds of islands are already the player islands and then the middle is ginormous or the other way around. I've seen a lot of different styles. I recommend making yours decently sized, so that way you have a bit of room to run around. That way, if something goes wrong, of course, you can run away, especially lava. But if you're doing a map with more players, like 16 players, then you might want to make them smaller. Regardless, let's make sure it's completely habitable. Now, for these outer islands, I made a pretty simplistic one. You know, it's just a Skywars map, and you can see it's a bunch of random things mashed together. And we also have this tree, some blackstone, gilded blackstone, so that way if you're determined, you could get some gold tools, a little small nether fortress, some basic lucky blocks, one hidden inside of the tree, and some bones, along with an underground section. You might want to include a crafting table into here. But regardless, you could hypothetically get yourself some pretty good gear if you're determined enough to actually start mining, in the case you get bad luck. Regardless, you can see all evenly spaced, and this is a pretty balanced map from above. It's a pretty nether star shaped map. It might be worth doing a diagonal rush to wipe out your competitors, things like that. But yeah, we also have these little small platforms, and I didn't say too much about them, more lucky blocks here. So certainly this is a map of all time. And of course, if you want the map download, you can ask and then I'll add it to my building world. Regardless, please like and subscribe. I notice I don't say that, and what do you know, I get less likes and subs. So yeah, could you please do that? Regardless, enjoy the rest of your day. Gearsaw